Awesome. Cool. We are live and recording. So, like I said, hope you guys are having a great day so far. Really excited to dive into today's topic. If you saw from the title, something along the lines of creating a foolproof system for fat loss. Really excited to dive into this because this is this podcast, this video is really going to go over the philosophy that I try to teach to my clients, all of our one-on-one clients that I work with, and also the philosophy that I directly use with them, right? And I'm gonna kind of go over like I don't know if I would say give you some secrets, but pretty much like reveal how I think about making adjustments to my clients' plans and how we're able to create predictable and controllable results with all of this too, because anybody can achieve some level of results when it comes to fat loss, changing their body composition, weight loss. But are you able to do it in a predictable and controllable way with an actual system besides just random results? And that's what I'm going to dive into. So I think this is so important because I don't think most people do this. I don't think most people have an actual system for creating results. I think a lot of people, they want to lose weight or they want to lose body fat, and they just try all these random things, right? They hear, Susie from work did keto, or Stacy from the grocery store did low carb, or maybe a family member did some kind of intermittent fasting or whatever. They hear about all these different types of diets, or maybe it's Weight Watchers, whatever it is, and they hear of some people having success on these things. So they go ahead and try them themselves because they're like, okay, if this person saw success, then hopefully I can, right? And they do this and they end up kind of implementing these diets or these strategies kind of randomly, right? Like they go 3 or 4 days, kind of staying on track. Like let's say keto, or let's go with low carb, for example, because it's a little less extreme than keto, but low carb. So you end up cutting out most of your carbs. So you're trying to really limit your carbs on all of your meals. And you do that for maybe 3 or 4 days in a row. You see some changes on the scale. You start to maybe see some changes in the mirror, and then maybe the weekend comes and you fall off, but you did relatively, or you feel like you did relatively well. You're like, okay, I had a few meals where I didn't eat any carbs, a few meals where I went really overboard. So I feel like they kind of canceled each other out. And then you start back over the next week and you kind of go through the same thing. And maybe it's not as clear cut as Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday. You feel like you stuck with your low carb diet. But maybe it's, Monday and Tuesday, you did really well. And then Wednesday you had a work dinner, celebrating something, and went out to dinner, had some bread, multiple bowls of bread that were sitting there. You got a really big dinner plate entree and ended up eating almost the whole thing, got some dessert too. So you're like, I went off my plan on Wednesday. And you get back to it, Thursday and Friday, and then maybe Saturday and Sunday. Same scenario as the past weekend where you end up feeling like you went off track, right? And I say feeling because there's not anything you're really specifically measuring to know if you necessarily went off track. You just feel like it. Like if you just mentally reflect very quickly, yeah, I probably ate more carbs than I need to, even though you probably don't even have a specific number of carbs you're aiming for, right? And this is part of the problem, is that people implement these strategies or these diets and they don't have clear cut variables or things that they're measuring, that they're doing. So you really don't know if you're on track or not, or if you're even on the plan that you're trying to implement or not. You're just kind of going off of feel all the time. Like, I feel like I did well. I feel like I did bad, right? And you're going off of all these feelings versus facts. And that's the difference, too, between having a clear, objective system for achieving fat loss, like I use with my clients, versus just going and doing these random diets. And this is also a big reason why I find people let their emotions get involved with fat loss. And they feel guilt when they go, quote unquote, or they feel like they go, quote unquote, off their plan, or vice versa, because all of their reflections are done off of feelings. They're done off of how well they feel like they did versus clear-cut, measurable variables. Or they measure their progress based off of, or not their progress, but they measure how well they're doing based off of like short-term results, so like short-term numbers or changes on the scale versus what they're actually doing, because they don't really know what they're doing, right? Like you might feel like you're eating well. That's another thing that people try to do when they want to lose weight is they just eat better or they watch what they eat. That's a big one that I hear. But what does that specifically mean? Like if you were to put some kind of numerical or like specific categorical variable on that or value on that, how would you define eating well or watching what you eat? That could look totally different from person to person. And one person might feel like they're watching what they eat well, but it still might not be enough to actually see a result. So we need to have very tangible, objective things that we're measuring, that we're inputting, or things that we're doing, or else you're just kind of guessing with your results and you're also going off of your feelings too much. So this kind of goes into kind of the next part of this, which is why having a system is even important in the first place, right? Why can't we just try all these random things and get all of these random results and eventually get to our goal? Some people get lucky and end up doing that. Like I know you've probably had a friend who hasn't tracked their food or hasn't focused on specific variables. They've just worked out a ton, worked out consistently, changed up their diet, made some, simple changes, and have lost a lot of weight and have maintained it. There are 100% people out there who have done it, but they are not the majority. Just like, there are professional athletes, right? There are professional athletes who maybe they didn't start playing basketball. Let's say a professional NBA player. There are players who didn't start playing basketball until like after high school, but they were just naturally really good. They naturally picked up on things, worked really hard from there. Obviously, we're probably blessed with some genetics of having really good height, really good athletic ability, and made it to the NBA, right? But that's not the majority, most people. And then when you kind of scale that out even farther, majority of people, no matter how hard you work, won't make it to the NBA anyway. Like there's such a small percentage of the world who are professional athletes or in the NBA. So even though there are people who have achieved something in a kind of more random way of just buckling down and working harder, it's not the majority. Most people need an actual like structured, systemized approach. So most people are not going to achieve the result they want. You probably won't achieve the result you want if you keep trying just these random things without really measuring different things, which I'm going to get into in a second. So that's one reason why having a system is important, because randomization, doing random things, while it may work for some people might get lucky by doing that. Most people, majority of people, need a more structured, planned approach. Another reason why having a system for fat loss is so important is because of the predictability. Like if you're doing random diets and you're randomly kind of feeling like you're falling off track and randomly feeling like you're doing really well, your results are not going to be predictable. You're not going to be able to know, hey, this week, did I actually really make progress or not? You're kind of unsure. You feel like most days you did well, but maybe those days you didn't do so well, or you feel like you didn't do so well, maybe you actually like undid all that progress. You don't really necessarily know. You're just kind of going off of feeling, which causes a lot of anxiousness in a lot of people's fat loss or weight loss journeys, because they don't really know if what they're doing is working, or they don't really know if they actually saw progress or moved the needle forward from week 1 to week 2, or from week 2 to week 3, or week 12 to week 13, right? And this is one of the biggest reasons why so many people end up giving up and quitting too, is because they're unsure of if they made progress this past week, and they feel like they put in effort. So they like start to second guess themselves of like, okay, did what I do this week really move the needle forward and give me progress? I'm not really sure, but it was hard. And if I'm not really sure if what I'm doing is getting results, but what I'm doing is hard, it's going to be really difficult to continue to stick with that, because like doing hard things is, I mean, it's in the definition or it's in the word, is hard. And if you don't have that like security of knowing that what you did actually pushed you forward, it's going to be really easy to convince yourself to, you know what, like maybe it's not worth it because I'm not really making progress anyway. So one big thing is your progress and your results need to be predictable, whether that's being predictable as far as, okay, I executed and hit all my variables, I know I made progress this week, or knowing, okay, I didn't hit all my variables this week and I know I didn't make progress. Even that certainty, even though it's not making progress, even that second scenario, knowing the certainty of, okay, I did this, this is why I'm not seeing results, gives you confidence in the plan, gives you confidence to move forward, because if you know, okay, I did this, and this is exactly why I'm not going to see actual fat loss this week, then you know that you have to just make an adjustment next week to see that predictable fat loss. So having a system allows your results to be predictable and know, okay, is this going to occur next week? Is this going to occur the following week? And you also, can long-term to a certain extent, as long as, you're able to stay consistent, you can kind of predict where you'll be in 2 months, in 3 months, and so on. Like when I work with clients, a lot of times, when I set out a plan and I see how their body's responding, I'm like, okay, in 4 weeks, like you'll probably be, down below 180 or something, or you probably will be down a few more pounds in 4 weeks, as long as we can stay consistent, obviously. But we can kind of predict these things where they will be if you have a system. And another reason why having a system is super important is repeatability. So if you have a system for fat loss where you have specific things that we're measuring and you're getting a specific result out of it, we can repeat that process and get a very similar result most of the time. So like a big thing that I do with one-on-one clients is like I keep track of what their calorie goals are every single week, how well they hit their calorie goals every single week. I keep track of how their body weight is trending every week, what changes we're seeing in that body weight trend. We're also taking a look at other variables too to measure progress, not just body weight, but I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm keeping track and keeping a log of all these things. That way, if, let's say Katie, and I'm not using, I have a client named Katie. I'm not using her specifically as an example, but just the name. Let's say Katie, she did a fat loss phase in January, and we were in a fat loss phase for 8 weeks. Her calories were at this number, and she lost on average this amount of weight over that 8-week span, saw these body composition changes, and then let's say over the next few months, we went into a maintenance phase or a building phase to try to build a little bit more muscle, take a little bit of stress away from being in a dieting phase right now. And then after those 3 months of just kind of maintaining, eating more food, we decide we want to go back into a fat loss phase. We can go and we want to see, let me backtrack just a little bit. We want to see roughly the same amount of progress that we saw in that first fat loss phase, because that first fat loss phase went really well. We can go back to that same calorie number or similar to it and expect the same kind of results and kind of repeat that same process and that same fat loss phase to get those repeated results too. So you can look at, those variables that you kept track of before, implement that same strategy months later. And as long as your lifestyle hasn't drastically changed as far as like how much movement you're getting per day, as long as your physical activity hasn't drastically changed during that time period, you're probably going to get pretty similar results. Now we can also use this previous data to make a different change in that second fat loss phase. So a lot of times when I bring a client on the first fat loss phase, while I've gotten really good at picking like a really good calorie number for clients based on just all the, experience I've had of working with hundreds of clients in the past few years and everything. But sometimes the first fat loss phase, while it goes well, I'm like, it could go a little bit better next time. And we could see a little bit faster progress to where it's still not in the extreme realm, because we never want to lose weight too extremely to where we're going to gain it back. But I'm like, okay, you lost on average 5 pounds in 8 weeks. We probably could push things a little bit more to lose maybe closer to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. So we did the first fat loss phase, took a little bit of a diet break. Now we're going to go back into a fat loss phase, but this time we're going to make a little bit of a calorie adjustment compared to the first time based off of that data that we saw a couple months ago and the rate of progress you saw there. So that's another really big benefit of having an actual system where you're measuring things and tracking things and seeing the actual input, is because then next time you go into a fat loss phase, you can either repeat the same thing if the previous one went perfectly, or you can make a little bit of adjustment to speed things up a little bit if there's room for that. So another huge benefit of having an actual system for fat loss. And also control. Like, you can really control your results once you learn the system and you learn what works for you specifically. And this is what I've learned so much about my body over these past almost 10 years. I've been tracking my food. Now, obviously, there's been weeks, vacations, holidays, birthdays, celebrations, random meals here and there where I have not tracked. I haven't tracked every single little piece of food for almost 10 years. But for the most part, in daily, regular life, in a routine, like, I'm tracking most of my food. And because of that, I have so much control over what changes my body sees. I know, okay, if I eat this many calories, I'm going to maintain my weight. I know if I eat a little bit more, like, 200 to 300 calories more than that number, I know that I will slowly gain weight over time if I want to, purposely try to maximize muscle growth. I know if I bring my calories down to this number, I see really predictable visual fat loss over a period of time. I know if I bring my calories down a little bit, but not as much as that, previous example, I might see some fat loss, but it's going to be a little bit slower than I want. So I've learned all these things. So I have so much control over what my body does. Now, obviously, it's up to me to execute on those plans once I decide to implement them and be consistent. But I know I have the information, I have the data from years of doing this to do that. And this is what I can really learn too with clients, which is why when I work with clients for a year's time, 2 years time even, which I have clients who I have worked with that long, they see almost like better results over time. Like, a lot of people will say your results get slower as you go forward, which is true. The body adapts slower, but because of all this previous data and information that I've picked up on from the client, from working with them from so long and seeing how their body responds to this and that, when I've worked with clients for a longer period of time, we're actually able to see maybe better results after a year or two of working together, because we've learned so much and we know exactly, what calorie number, what protein number to implement for this, or what calorie number or protein number to implement for that. And we make these like distinct changes, and it's all up to them to just be consistent, but we figured out the guesswork because we figured out the system that works for them. So that's another reason why system is so important, is because you just get so much more control over your results versus just trying random things here and there. And sometimes I'm working, sometimes they don't working, because you don't really have any like variables you're measuring. You're just kind of like implementing random strategies. And like I said, it causes a lot of anxiousness in people, causes a lot of guilt too, because they're basing all of their like assessments off of feelings, like feeling like doing well versus what the actual like numbers say. So how do we create a system? Right? Like, so went over why having a system is so important. And this is why I use it with my one-on-one clients, but how do we create a system? So first, we have to have clear variables or inputs, what I like to call them, that we're measuring. So these are the things, the behaviors, the actions that we are doing that are going to directly contribute to body composition change, fat loss, fat gain, or not really fat gain. Most people don't want to gain fat. Some people maybe should though, but building muscle or maintaining your body fat level. So what inputs are we doing? What behaviors, what actions are we taking on a daily basis that are contributing to that? So for my one-on-one clients, we focus on 3 main variables that I really like to have clients prioritize. So our calorie goal, which I give them every single week, protein goal, which I give them every single week, and a step goal that I give them every single week and adjust. So those are the 3 big things, along with fiber. I'll add fiber in there. If you don't remember, a couple weeks ago, did a really informative live on fiber about the benefits of that with fat loss. But let's add in fiber as kind of the 4th thing. So calories, protein, steps, and fiber. Those are the 4 main things, along with the regular resistance training program. So maybe let's add in 5. Those are the 5 big things that are going to directly impact fat loss the most. Or they can directly impact fat gain if you are not doing those things. But those are the 5 main things that are going to directly move your progress forward. So those are kind of our 5 variables or 5 inputs that we are keeping track of. So they, like I said, they have a calorie goal, they have a step goal, they have a protein goal, they have a fiber number they should shoot for, and then they have their workouts that they're assigned per week. And if they are hitting those variables, we can see what result or output they are getting from hitting those variables or those inputs, right? It's like an equation, right? You have these 5 things that you are adding together, right? And then equals on the other side of the equal sign of the equation, you have the output or results, which is basically how your body fat levels are changing, how your clothes are fitting, how your progress pictures are looking, how strong you're feeling in the gym, how your energy levels are feeling, how your body weight is trending, right? All of those things are on the opposite side of the equation. They're on the right side of the equal sign. And everything on the left side of the equal sign are your inputs or the actions that you can actually take, right? Like you can't take an action necessarily of getting stronger. You get stronger because of the workouts you did. You don't get stronger like you don't I don't know how to say that backwards, but you don't actively get stronger without doing the workouts, right? You don't see the fat loss without actually, hitting your calorie goal or getting your steps in. You don't actually see your clothes start to fit better without doing those actions first. So those actions, all those 5 things are on the left side of the equation: calories, protein, fiber, steps, and workouts. And then on the right side of the equation, are all of the variables or the outputs or the results that you potentially get from this, which would be, the changes in body fat, changes in muscle mass, changes in strength, changes in energy levels, changes in the way your clothes are fitting, changes in the way your progress pictures look, and changes in the way the scale is trending. All those things are the results or outputs, right? So when I work with a client, I give them specific inputs, those 5 things: calories, protein, steps, workouts, and fiber, and see, okay, if Kristen is eating this many calories, this is, and doing all these workouts in this is the output or result we're getting. So if I'm not seeing the actual result or the other side of the equation that I want to see, then I'll make an adjustment to that calorie goal, or I'll make an adjustment maybe to her step goal or her workouts per week, or this or that. I'll make some kind of adjustment to one of the inputs or maybe a couple of the inputs to then try to tip the scale in the right direction, not the body weight scale, but just tip the scale, physical scale, if that makes sense, in our favor on the other side of the equation. So it's a very scientific and systemized process, right? And then I'm recording all of these things, like I said. So then when we finally find what works, right? Okay, this level of calories, this level of steps, this level of protein, fiber, everything. And I see, okay, these are the changes physically that we're seeing in all of these different realms. Then I put a stamp on that. And I'm like, okay, this works for you, at least right now, right? If your lifestyle changes and everything else changes, stress changes, things could obviously adjust, but this works for you. So I'm going to put a little star next to it. And I know that we can come back to this in the future if, we want to go into another fat loss phase down the road or something. So this is how you have to start thinking about your fat loss or weight loss if you want it to be something that your results stick around long term, and you want it to be something, like I said, that's predictable. So it doesn't cause you stress or anxiety of, okay, are you actually seeing results or not? Am I actually doing well? You have to do it if you want something that's repeatable, so you can immediately go back and implement all those previous inputs or variables to get those outputs you want. Or if you want something that is very controllable. If you want just random results, sporadic, doing things here or there, and maybe stumbling upon the result you want, then don't have an actual system. That's okay, but most people don't want that. And I'm assuming, if you're in this group and you're watching this, you probably don't want random results either. And a key part of this too is when you have these inputs and these variables, these actions that you're taking, and you're looking at that other side of the equation, progress pictures, body weight, body fat level, clothes fitting, all those things, you have to do it and measure these things over a consistent period of time. If you are making changes after just a week, especially a week of maybe you being maybe halfway consistent, then you're making changes too soon. When I work with clients, I typically wait to see usually 3 weeks, sometimes even 4 weeks of, okay, she's been consistent with all these inputs on this side of the equation. I'm consistently seeing no change in any of these outputs on this side of the equation. So it's been roughly a 3-week period, maybe even a 4-week period of consistently doing this and consistently seeing this, and it's not the change that we want. So we're going to make an adjustment. If you're making adjustments every single week, you're making adjustments too quickly. And like a big key to this too is, like I said, is them being consistent. If you are only hitting your calorie goal, 4 days out of the week, only hitting your step goal 3 to 4 days out of the week, only hitting your workouts, a couple times a week when you're supposed to be doing 4, like you're not consistent enough to even know if that formula or all these variables together works or not. So you're not consistent enough to really make any change, to the plan, to make any changes to the plan. And that's another kind of issue that I see people do is like they have this plan where, okay, they're going to aim for this many calories, this many steps, this many workouts. And they're so inconsistent with it, only doing it like half the time, and they're not seeing results. And then they feel like they need to make a change and like do things more extreme because they're like, well, like this isn't working. But you don't have to be more extreme. You just have to be more consistent with what you try to do. Or what you can do, and this is why I like to ease clients into things, is take an easier approach. Like instead of aiming for 4 workouts and only hitting 2, just make 2 workouts your goal. And instead of aiming for 10,000 steps and only hitting 7,000, make just 7,000 your goal. That way you can actually hit those variables you're setting for yourself consistently. And then we have like really good data to look at then, because then if you set your goal, your step goal at 7,000 and your workouts at 2 a week, and you're actually able to hit that consistently, we can see what outputs we get from that as far as your results, right? Like instead of going back and forth sporadically throughout the week of sometimes doing more workouts, sometimes doing less steps, sometimes going back and forth, we don't have consistent inputs to see like what the consistent output or results would be. But if you set the bar lower and actually achieve that consistently, now we can at least collect some data on, okay, like you're consistently hitting 2 workouts and 7,000 steps. You're consistently seeing this amount of progress, and then we can make a decision on, do we need to adjust any of those variables slightly or not? Because you might find like maybe doing 2 workouts a week and hitting 7,000 steps, maybe you are seeing a consistent like output of results, and maybe you don't even actually have to change anything right now and actually go up in steps or go up in workouts. Maybe you don't have to. So like so important to, have these inputs, specific variables you're measuring, and having specific ways to measure the progress in multiple dimensions, not just the weight on the scale. Like I always talk about, there's 3 different ways that I like to measure progress in clients. Visual progress, which is progress pictures, super important because a lot of times you can make really drastic change in your body composition through pictures, but the scale weight doesn't really change much. So progress pictures, we have to look at that. Numerical data, so how your body weight is trending on the scale is kind of the second piece, right? That's kind of the number side of things. And then the third variable is more like subjective or perceptive changes. So how you feel like your clothes are fitting or how you feel like your energy levels are. That's kind of the third way. So pictures, numerical data, and subjective data are like the 3 ways we measure those results. And we consistently measure them in all those variables. And then, we know if we have to make changes based on what we're getting out of those. So make sure you're being consistent if you're going to take this systemized approach. And you have to be able to be honest with yourself. And this is probably one of the hardest things about not having a coach if you're doing this on your own is it's very hard to be objective with yourself, be honest with yourself, and not only have the accountability to like track all these things, but also to have the like objective accountability to look at them in a non-biased way and be like, oh, like I actually do see some physical changes like visually through my pictures, or, oh, like I actually didn't execute super well with my calories this week, or maybe I did, vice versa, right? It's very hard to be objective. And I've dealt with both scenarios. I've dealt with clients who think that they have done really well throughout the week of hitting their goals. And like I review everything and I'm like, hey, like you actually didn't hit your calorie goal at all this week. You were kind of close, but we're still off every single day. So like we can execute a lot better, right? Where they thought that they actually did hit their goals throughout the week. So I've had clients in that scenario where they think they're executing these variables better than what they actually are, and then it's for me to be the coach and do it out of love, compassion, and grace and empathy. Be like, hey, actually, like, these are what the numbers are like. We actually didn't hit our goal, so let's try to get within those ranges a little bit better next week. So I've had clients in that scenario, but I've also had clients in the opposite scenario where they are beating themselves up in their check-in, talking about, oh, I could have done so much better. Like, I would give myself like a 50% this week as far as effort or execution. Like, I didn't do well, and then I look at their log and they had one day where they were maybe 10 calories short. I'm like, okay, you hit your goal 6 out of the 7 days, and one day was only 10 calories short, which is pretty negligible. I think you did way better than, actually the numbers say you did way better than what you're describing. So let me bring you back down to earth and be like, you actually did a great job this week as far as being consistent. So you have to be able to be objective with yourself. And honestly, like, it's very hard to do that especially when you spent years and years and years, like, being caught up in your feelings when it comes to weight loss and fat loss. And this was actually a really good conversation I had with a client last week where she was getting in her head, feeling guilty about going over her calorie goal and overeating on a specific day or over the weekend. And I'm like, hey, like, one thing I want you to really learn to do over this process as we work together is take the emotions out of it. There's no reason why you should feel guilty about overeating. You should look at it as, okay, like, what are my inputs as far as my calories, my protein, steps, workouts, all this stuff. And, maybe you hit your steps, workouts, protein, even fiber, but your calories were up by 300 higher than what your goal was. You're not a bad person for eating 300 calories more than your goal. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. You shouldn't get this like emotional response out of that and feel this like negative feeling of, oh, I'm a bad person, or oh, I'm a failure, or this or that. Take it for what it is. Your input on that day was just 300 calories more than what your goal was. And it is what it is. So if your input is that much higher than your goal, then maybe we expect a slightly different output as far as fat loss or whatever on that specific day. But it doesn't have to be a feelings thing. And this is where so many people get caught up in feeling negative, even feeling overly positive about things sometimes. Like, I think that I might be in the minority here, but I think feeling overly positive sometimes about this too can get you in, a trap if it rebounds in the opposite direction really hard. But we don't want it to be a feelings thing of us getting caught up in our emotions. We want to think about it as like a science experiment, almost as a formula of these are the inputs, these are the outputs, and this is what the equation looks like. If I want to change the outputs, then I just need to change the inputs. And it has nothing to do with how valuable you are as a person, or if you're a good person or not. So obviously, like, with this system, make sure you're being consistent, make sure you're being objective, and then make appropriate changes based off of previous data. So like I said, look back to, like, I have clients, and if I work with them for over a year, and like last January, we did a fat loss phase at a specific number. Her lifestyle was like this, and this is how she responded. If her lifestyle is the same this upcoming January, when we enter another fat loss phase, I'll go back. I'll scroll back to all that data and be like, okay, this is where we started with the calories. This is the progress we saw at this level. Let's just implement that again and see, if that gets us that consistent, predictable, repeatable results that we saw, 12 months prior. Or maybe, you just go back a few months to the most recent fat loss phase. And like I said, see if maybe progress was a little bit slower than we wanted, and maybe be like, okay, how do we make some kind of adjustment to these inputs to see a little bit better result or output this time? So it's just all data collection, and the more objective you can be, and the longer you collect data, and the longer you collect data with a coach that can help you be objective, the more consistent and predictable your results even get over time. Like I said, it's a simple switch for me to flip as far as if I want to go into a calorie surplus and focus on specifically like purposely building muscle, if I want to flip a switch and just go to maintenance, or if I want to flip a switch and go into fat loss. Like it's that simple for me. It's simple, not necessarily easy, because whenever we make changes to our food intake or maybe our step goal or something like that, we're making changes to our lifestyle ultimately, and we're making changes to our routine and the way we do things on a day-to-day basis. So it's not always easy, but it's simple in that extent. And there are obviously scenarios and cases where things get more complicated, right? Like some clients, they need to eat a lower calorie intake because of just their stature and how small they are, but that lower calorie intake they have to eat is unsustainable. So we implement, higher calorie days throughout the week to kind of bring their metabolism up, kind of prevent some of those negative hormonal adaptations from occurring over time. Some clients need diet breaks every 6 weeks to prevent themselves from getting burnouts and prevent negative adaptations like low fatigue or high fatigue, low energy, their metabolism slowing down. Some clients need those diet breaks or those higher calorie phases every 6 weeks, where some clients don't need them until every 12 weeks. So it gets complicated in that sense, but the best thing you can do is collect this data over time. That way you learn your body specifically. And that's like one of the biggest things that I do with my clients. And one of the coolest things, that's why I love my job so much, is because it's like a fun experiment for me too. When I start working with a client, I hope clients don't take this the wrong way, but it's fun for me to it's like this puzzle of, okay, how is Jessica's body respond to this increase in calories or this decrease? And it's like playing, I don't even know, I guess a puzzle. I already used that word, but putting these pieces together and making these slight adjustments and finding the perfect formula, or like a science experiment, right? Like with the little tubes and the little drops of, I don't even know what you call them, chemicals, but I think there was another word I was thinking of, and finding out the perfect formula that works for Jessica or for Amy or for Susan, right? It's fun for me, and it's gotten very efficient for me too, as I've gone over time, or as I've coached over time, because now I have hundreds of clients that I've worked with and years of experience to be able to find that perfect formula faster. I'm like, okay, Jessica, this is her lifestyle, this is her stature, this is her previous experience. I had a client, Claire, who maybe 2 years ago that I work with, who had a very similar structure, lifestyle, and all that. And I can refer back in my memory, or even refer back to her notes that I have on her, and see, okay, this is what worked for Claire. And they were in very similar circumstances, very similar dieting history, very similar lifestyle, this and that. Let's implement something similar with, I forget what name I used in this example. I think it was Jessica, but let's use something similar for Jessica, and see how it goes and see how her body responds. And a lot of times I can find that perfect formula a lot faster now than what I could have 5 years ago. But it's a systemized approach, and I think it's so important. And most people don't think about fat loss this way. They think about just implementing these random strategies. They hear these people on TikTok giving these motivational speeches of just work harder and this and that, which is totally true. Most of us actually should work a lot harder than we probably do, because it's human nature to want to just do what's easy, to do what's convenient, to do what's comfortable. But it's when we work harder with a clear system that is, scientific in nature and not just all emotions and everything, that's where true results happen over time. And that's where you end up also seeing this huge detachment from the number on the scale and not letting it affect you anymore. You see this huge detachment from having these negative emotions around food, and when you overeat and everything, you end up detaching all these negative emotions from this process, and you feel this freedom on your fitness and fat loss journey that you've never felt before. And that's one of the most rewarding things, is when clients message me, either maybe it's a couple of weeks in, I've had clients do that, but maybe it's a couple months in, or maybe it's multiple months, and you know what, I finally don't have this attachment to the scale anymore. I just step on, record it, just data. Or I don't have this attachment to if I go over my calorie number, because I know like what happens to my body if I go over, and it's not as bad as what most people think. At least if you just go over like one day. Obviously, if you're going over every single day for multiple days in a row, there's probably some weight gain that'll occur. But like getting those messages from clients is so rewarding, because I'm like, now you're getting it. You're getting that this is just this system, and there shouldn't be any emotions attached to it. And once you learn that, you, like I said, you really just get this freedom around the whole process, and your mind gets so clear because it's not so foggy based on guilt and all this stuff. So hopefully this was eye-opening and helpful, and I would definitely love to hear in the comments, like, if you've ever thought about your fitness or your fat loss journey as this just objective system, or this equation of here are your inputs, here are the things, the actions you're implementing, the behaviors, and here are your clear outputs, your results, and measuring variables on both sides, and then making these slight adjustments and collecting the data over time. Like, would love to hear if you've ever thought about the process in this way, if this was really eye-opening. You're like, wow, like I've been going about this all wrong, or maybe I actually have been like naturally moving towards thinking about things in this way, but I just don't necessarily know how to implement it myself. Like, would definitely love to know below. So definitely comment below if this was helpful. Appreciate you all. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one.